Welcome to the Hunting Beast Report, a live video podcast with Dan Infalt and host Jeremy Gillespie.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Stealth Outdoors. The off-season's a great time to rehab your gear, so head on over to Stealth Outdoors at www.stealthoutdoors.com to pick up some climbing stick wraps, cam buckle covers, platform cable wraps, or stealth strip rolls for all of your miscellaneous silencing needs. Today's show is also made possible by Hunting Beast Gear, innovators in mobile hunting gear and the designers of the Beast Sticks and Beast Stand. Check out the latest products at www.huntingbeastgear.com. And now, on to the podcast. All right, here we are again. We're live, as always, joined by Dan Infalt. And today we have two special guests, Sebastian Neisius and Jake Woodley. Guys, how you doing today?
Good.
Hey, guys.
Good.
So today we're going to start out the show with, with an announcement. Beast Gear and Stealth Outdoors are both going to be at the Open Season Sportsman's Expo at the Wisconsin Dells. That's coming up this weekend, March 22nd through 24th. Dan, you're going to be there, right? Anybody else from the Beast crew? I know I talked to Uncle Lou, and he's going to be there.
Yeah, I'm going to be there. And Ricky and Mario, of course. I mean, I'm going to be at the Beast Gear booth all 3 days. Come by, stop by, say hey. Lou will be right next to us. He's going to be on the other side of the wall from us.
Awesome. And then before we get into, we're going to do some news articles today. Give each of our guests a chance to introduce themselves. So, Sebastian, give us a little bio of who you are and what you're doing.
So, yeah, I'm full-time forester with Clark County. So I actually am a Clark County. I grew up in Clark County on the northern end and liked being outdoors. So I chose that for passion. Went to Stevens Point for my bachelor's degree in forest management. And luckily I was able to get hired right there in my home county there. So I manage the county forest for Clark County. So I do most of the paint slinging on the forest. If you drive by and you see paint from the road, that's usually either me or Jake there. So
awesome. And then that's something we're going to talk about today, forestry specifically. So how about yourself, Jake?
Yeah, I got a similar story to Sebastian. Just always loved being outside. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we had a little bit of breaking up in your signal. Go ahead again, though.
Similar story to Sebastian. Just love being outside. Wanted to pursue a career in it ultimately. Actually wanted to be a game warden, but I figured I'd be working while the hunting season would be going on mostly. So I decided to go work at, I figured forestry would be a good career. Like Sebastian said, I also managed the Clark County Forest. Him and I pretty much mark all the timber sales for the county.
Awesome. Well, looking forward to tapping your guys' knowledge. So we're going to start off today with an article that Dan saw recently, pretty interesting one. So let me bring that up here. So the headline is Pennsylvania man convicted of using drone to help hunters find deer carcasses. And I'm just going to read a little bit of the article here in case people haven't seen it. It says a Pennsylvania man who uses drones to try to locate wounded deer shot by hunters so they can retrieve their carcasses has been convicted of violating state hunting laws. Joshua Wiggenroth, 35, of Downingtown, plans to appeal the verdicts handed down Thursday by Lancaster County District Judge Raymond Scheller. The case apparently marked the first time anyone has been cited and tried in Pennsylvania for using a drone to recover a dead game animal, and it hinged on whether Wiggenroth was involved in hunting as defined by state law. Then there's a quote that says, the legislature needs to address this, Scheller said as he delivered his verdict. Everyone is playing catch up to the science. So one more interesting fact down here is basically it sounds like on December 6th, an undercover game commission officer contacted Wiggenroth and asked him to meet and help find a deer he shot in the Welsh Mountain Nature Preserve. Wiggenroth met the officer. There within the hour, had the officer sign a waiver stating he wanted to recover the deer carcass, but if the deer was found to still be alive, he agreed to hunt the deer another day. So basically, this guy started flying his thermal drone looking for this deer that didn't exist. It was fabricated by the Game Commission. And then the game wardens confiscated his drone, gave him 4 counts, it says, and then he was fined $1,500. He plans to appeal. So let's go ahead and start out with Sebastian. What do you think about, one, let's give me your thoughts on this specific case where they kind of set him up, and 2, do you think drones should or should not be allowed in hunting at all, and specifically in deer recovery? What do you think?
Yeah, I think specifically deer recovery for sure. I mean, if anything that helps find a deer, I think that's pretty cool stuff. Especially if you lose blood or whatnot, and you can use that equipment to find it, then more power to you, I think. So,
how about you, Jake?
I think they should be used in the right application, but not specifically for actively hunting, I guess. I think recovery is a good use of it, I guess. We actually did a drive with a group of guys, and they called the drone, and they never ended up finding the deer. But I mean, it was a good opportunity to try to find the deer and salvage if they did find it. So I don't think for actively hunting, no. But
and Dan?
Yeah, I thought that was an intriguing article because the game wardens told him he couldn't look for deer before they busted him, and he said, "Show me, the law." And I can't remember exactly what it said, but it said something like you couldn't use it for hunting. And he said, "I'm not hunting." And they said, "Finding a deer is considered hunting." And he said he had talked to his attorney, and his attorney says it's not. So then they set up this thing and busted him because he went against them, telling him not to. But my feelings on that, regardless of the story, which I thought was intriguing, I have a little different view on it. I think it is a great tool for recovering down game, but I think we already have dogs, and drones is too easy to cheat. I really hate the idea of people being able to say they're looking for a deer and being using a drone. I could literally, if I went to my marsh and I flew a drone around, and somebody stops me and I say I'm looking for a wounded deer, I can go and I can find where every big buck out there, my target animal is bedded. With the technology they have, I can zoom in on it. I can see which animal it is, see right where he's at, and then go out right then and set up on it. Now, that would be illegal, but if you can use a drone in a public marsh, I think it's just too tempting. And for example, I've talked to people who use drones for recovery that are really good people. I mean, I like the people that do it. And they told me about, oh yeah, that buck that I shot. We saw that with our drone, when we were out doing some stuff, and we were going to go after it, but it was living on private most of the time when we saw it, which kind of threw me for a loop. Like, you're going to go after it after you saw it with your drone. Well, that's illegal. But how do you not? I mean, now it's there, even if you saw it on accident, right? And then, I've overheard a different group talking where they saw, while they're tracking for somebody, they saw several giant bucks, and they were talking about how they're going to go back after them. I just think it's too tempting for people. I think it's too easy of a resource, and I don't like it. And I think once that can of worms is opened up, it's going to cause a lot of issues. They're going to get cheaper. They're going to get easier to use, kind of like the trail camera thing. They're going to get, everybody's going to have them at some point. And I just don't like it. I know I'm the minority, not just on this group, but probably out of everybody. But I can foresee some bad things happening with that because it just it can make cheating too easy, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't think you're the minority, Dan. I'm probably the extreme minority. Like, I don't run any cell cams, and it's not for budget reasons. I don't know. It's up to each hunter, right? I'm not trying to make rules for everybody. It's illegal, but at some point you have to draw the line. And I feel like the technology that's out today, not just cell cams, just I talk about it too, and like modern rifles out west. In the 70s, your average guy shot a 270 with a 3x9 scope or something, and his realistic effective range was 250, maybe 300 yards. And now you got guys shooting modern calibers with ballistic apps and scopes and all this stuff, and it's much easier to shoot 600-700 yards now. And I don't know, there's a lot of technology out there that makes it easier, and I just think that's one less thing that we need to add, thermal drones. And like I said, the temptation is there. This guy, it sounds like he had the right intent. He had a waiver. He'd only show up after dark, obviously outside of hunting hours, so he couldn't be construed as hunting, which that's all good. I mean, I think he was taking an ethical approach to it, and the law is obviously pretty gray in Pennsylvania, but that's just my 2 cents. Is I don't want any more technology in hunting.
Yeah, I'm not accusing the guy of anything. I'm just saying that the whole process of using a drone just seems a little scary to me.
Yeah.
Of what you can start, that's all.
Yeah. And Sebastian, maybe you can message Jake. I think Jake dropped off. It looks like on my end his connection was buffering. So
Can you have just do a phone in or something? Because he kept popping out in and out constantly.
I haven't been able to hear him, so I have my phone up. So when he talks, listen on my phone, I turn the volume up just a touch.
Yeah. Well, we'll maybe in a minute here, Dan, I can see if I can get him to call in. But for now, we'll see if he can rejoin. Just have him try to rejoin. But
okay,
we can just go on without him too. If he gets in, he gets in.
Yeah. We're gonna look at one other recent news article. This one is from my home state, so this is kind of a wild one. I think this has been popping up on people's social media, so maybe some people have already seen it. But headline here is Montana man used animal tissue and testicles to breed, quote, giant sheep for sale to hunting preserves. So Billings, Montana, a Montana rancher illegally used tissue and testicles from wild sheep killed by hunters in Central Asia and the U.S. to breed, quote, giant hybrid sheep for sale to private hunting preserves in Texas, according to court documents and federal prosecutors. Arthur Jack Schubarth, 80, of Vaughn, Montana, pleaded guilty to felony charges of wildlife trafficking and conspiracy to traffic wildlife during an appearance Tuesday before a federal judge in Great Falls. Each count carries a maximum penalty, 5 years in prison, $250,000 fine. And this is interesting. It says court documents describe a years-long conspiracy beginning in 2013, so 10 years ago now, in which Schubarth and at least 5 other people sought to create, quote, giant sheep hybrids by using crossbreeding different species. Their goal was to garner high prices from hunting preserves where people shoot captive trophy animals for a fee. Basically, they got Marco Polo, which is the largest sheep species. They got DNA and or semen from testicles of a Marco Polo sheep, imported it. They then got that cloned into embryos and were inseminating sheep to have these Marco Polo hybrids. And then the guy also paid someone in Montana for testicles from a Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep, where they did the same thing with that. And they were trying to create these hybrids to sell basically to what it sounds like in the article, high fence places in Texas for trophy hunting fees. So very sophisticated crime, in my opinion. So Dan, we'll start with you on this one. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. It seems like the guy was into he it says somewhere in there that he owns a hunting preserve, so where you go hunt fenced in animals.
Yeah, real quick, I'm gonna interrupt you, Dan. So in 2000, Montana, prior to 2000, you could still have high fence hunts, and in 2000 there was a ballot initiative where they outlawed hunting on them, but you could still have the preserve as like a exotic species farm.
So he was probably selling the animals, yeah.
Right, but you couldn't hunt in Montana on the high fence anymore.
So anyway, he's got this preserve, and I think he's probably used to messing with stuff. I mean, that's what people do. That's how they create world record whitetails in all these places. It really makes me wonder if they even knew they were committing a crime. I think they got him like on the Lacey Act or something for transferring having something illegal and you transferred over a state line. But I mean, that's no excuse. You need to know the laws, right? If you're dealing with stuff like that. But those sheep, I could see why he was doing it. They look just like, bighorn sheep, and if you put something like that on your wall, it's gonna look like you got the world record.
Yeah.
And the trouble is, if something like that escapes one of those ranches and breeds with a native bighorn sheep or something, we got problems. I mean, it just changes the whole landscape. And I really don't like bringing hybrids here and stuff. Texas is known for that. I mean, it ain't just that. I mean, I know it came from Montana, but they were selling them in Texas.
Yeah.
And Texas has a lot of African animals that live in the wild now because of those ranches. They've escaped, and they're, so it's.
Yeah, nilgai or whatever. They got all sorts of weird stuff down there. And what else was I going to say? Oh, yeah, I skimmed over some of the article, but I think the guy knew he was committing crimes because just in the interest of keeping it short, I skimmed over it. But he was falsifying veterinary records and doing some other stuff that was obviously fairly shady. So
he's probably trying to do it on the sly.
Yeah.
Funny, he's 80 years old. You think he'd be beyond that by that time? You think he'd grow up a little bit?
It's never too late to make a buck, Dan.
I guess.
Looks like Jake's back. Jake, can you hear us? If you can, what do you think about this guy cloning trophy sheep and trying to sell them to high fence places?
I don't personally like the hybrids, I guess. Certain things, but not with sheep. And it always seems to come back to money. Somebody's trying to make a buck off trying to create something new, I guess. So in this case, I don't like it, I guess. I don't agree with it.
And Sebastian?
Yeah, I'm not much of a fan of high fence hunting anyway. I like the fair chase. So, yeah, it seems like all these hybrids are just trying to make things bigger and better. And so
it's crazy because I don't remember exactly the year. I'd have to Google it. Maybe I'll Google it, but everybody probably remembers when they've cloned the first sheep. What was it called? Dolly, I think. Let me, I'm Googling it real quick. So that was 1996. So that's not that long ago. That's a little over, 25 years? And now it's evolved from where we couldn't even clone a sheep to now people are cloning sheep in these black markets to sell them to trophy hunting places. It's crazy how fast that evolved.
It's how fast something like that can go onto down the wrong road, In Wisconsin, we, speaking on Sebastian's point, we used to, years and years ago, have where you could have high fence ranches for certain types of hunting, and I think they still do for deer, but they had wild boars, and because of the potential of them escaping and being a Russian breed that can live in our winters, they decided they didn't want them in Wisconsin, so they closed down all the preserves. And a bunch of them that were large preserves couldn't catch all the pigs, and eventually they just took the fences down and let them go. And then we had a problem for a while.
Yeah, there was another ranch in Montana. The guy got in trouble a few years ago, and I think they forced him to sell it somehow. But he had one of those leftover high fence places from 2000, where before 2000 he was selling elk hunts and mule deer hunts. Well, FWP, which is Montana's game agency, Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, they went to do like an inspection to count his inventory, and he had like 10 extra elk that weren't his that had come in from the outside, and extra mule deer and stuff. So it's pretty easy for those things to get commingled. I think there's a lot of suspicion that that's how CWD started in Colorado and stuff. So probably not a great practice all the way around. So anyways, we just want to go over those kind of neat articles in the news. So it's always fun to talk about the latest happenings in the outdoor world. But today we're going to talk specifically with these two gentlemen about forestry. So we'll start with Sebastian. Just give me your overall view of how forestry fits in with wildlife management, specifically white-tailed deer, and maybe some lessons you've learned while being in the forest and how that's applied to your deer hunting.
Yeah. So, I mean, when we work at the county, we got multiple goals in mind. Timber, recreation, and wildlife are our biggest three. We're certified with the Forest Stewardship Council. So we have standards and whatnot that we got to do to promote wildlife habitat on the timber sales and whatnot that that we're establishing and selling and cutting on the county forest. Most of them favor oak, because oak's a popular mass species for both deer and turkey. And it's also a high-priced timber species. So on Clark County Forest, we do a lot of oak management. So we're doing a lot to regenerate it, to release it, to get it growing healthy. So we do quite a bit of stuff for wildlife in that regards.
And then, Jake, talk to me, and this, I'm sure this is something you guys deal with, or maybe you don't. I know it was becoming a problem in Michigan. Oak wilt, that's like a common tree disease, right? How does that affect the oaks, and what measures are being taken to mitigate oak wilt, or is there anything that you guys can do to help prevent that?
Yeah, I mean, so the biggest thing, we, per the DNR biologist and everything, we have an oak wilt or an oak cutting period that we can't cut any oak. It's depends on where you are in the state. I think the northern half is April 15th through July 15th. And then the southern half is April 1st through July 15th. Just because the southern half generally warms up a little faster. So you get the bugs flying around a little sooner. At Clark County, I mean, we've adopted just April 1st regardless. We're kind of right in the middle, so we tend to err on the side of caution. So basically, if we're cutting oak, like we're taking individual tree oaks out of a stand, and we have that risk to introduce like the disease into the stand, then that's usually why we're a place where we won't cut. If you got like a more maple dominated or pine dominated, then we don't really worry about it as much, just because it doesn't transmit to those trees, or it can't transmit from those trees to oak, I guess. So the biggest thing is the restriction period from April 1st to July 15th.
And for people that don't know, can you guys help us out? What is oak wilt? Is that a bacteria, a fungus, a bug? How does it get it, and what's the effect on the tree long term?
So oak wilt's a fungus. Essentially what it does is it plugs up the vascular tissues in oak trees so it can't transport nutrients up and down from the roots to the leaves. So it essentially cuts off circulation to the top of the tree. The main way that's transported is a certain species of beetle that actually transports the spores of that fungus onto open wounds of other oak trees. Oak wilt specifically susceptible with the red oak species. White oak has kind of an adaptation called tyloses. It's like a waxy film in the vascular tissues that helps actually fight oak wilt, because the nutrients aren't as readily available to pull up and down in the tree. But essentially, yeah, that's what oak wilt is. It gets into the tree, and it'll actually spread from one tree to another through the root system. So once you get the fungus in the vascular tissues, it can transfer from tree to tree if they're grafted together under the ground.
And what's the long-term outlook like? I'm sure everybody or at least everybody in the Midwest has went through the emerald ash borer debacle, where ash trees are basically non-existent anymore in a lot of the areas that they used to thrive. How's the long-term outlook for oaks with oak wilt?
It's fine. You just got to make sure you actively look for it and manage it when you do see it. Management strategies we approach, if we get a tree that we know has oak wilt, or a pocket of trees that we have oak wilt, we'll look at actually killing all the trees that are potentially root grafted to that infected tree. The DNR's got a model, based on, the diameter of the tree and the diameter of all of its neighbors, what kind of footage needs to be between those trees to be considered not grafted to be safe. So if we know we have a pocket like that, we're looking at, actively trying to cut all the trees around it so it doesn't keep spreading through a stand of oak, because you might have 100 acres of oak, and if you don't do anything about it, it's just going to keep spreading slowly. The good thing about it is it doesn't spread real fast. It might kill 2-3 trees in a single direction, every year. It doesn't like like ash borer, I mean, you get the beetles in the stand, and it's, you know, within a couple of years, you're starting to see rapid decline in your ash trees because of how fast they reproduce and how fast they kill a tree. So it's a slow moving disease, and it's common statewide. You know, most government agencies know about it, and they actively try to prevent it.
So when
Yeah,
you
and I mean, going back to
good,
oh, I say going back to what Sebastian was saying about like diameter plays a big role. I mean, obviously you got a bigger tree, it's going to have a bigger root system. So if you got a tree that's 20 inches compared to a tree that's 10 inches, I don't know if it's like double the length you have to go out to potentially be root grafted, but it could be substantially more. So, yeah, I just want to make that point. It just depends on diameter, how far out you got to essentially treat them and kill them, I guess, essentially.
so when you're planning a cut, how do you decide how big of an area and which trees you're taking and which ones you're leaving?
So that question is the forestry answer is it depends. A lot determines so how we determine a size of a cut is we have all of our forest mapped into timber stands, which is like cover types. Like say you got oak saw logs over red maple pole timber. So we go through and map it like that, and then we actually determine the age, the health of it. Yeah, just basically how far along, what our goal is in the end. I might say most of our goal is timber production, but with timber production, we do get wildlife goals accomplished too. There are more specific wildlife goals that you could do instead of timber, but so I mean, just say you got an oak stand that's 100 years old, and the economic rotation age is 120 years. We're going to start looking at rotating that. Start by doing one or two cuts before it gets rotated to try to, and our goal is to try to regenerate the oak most of the time. So we're doing a cut to try to promote that. And we do a lot of oak management. So we do like prescribed fire, scarification of the ground. Those are the main two, I guess, but I don't know, Sebastian, anything else to add to that?
Yeah. I mean, in regards to Dan's question, you know, when you look at the county forest on Onyx, you know, it just looks so vast, and it's just one great big landmass. We actually manage our forest down to a timber stand level. Our timber stands are broken into compartments. So our forest is 134,000 acres. Out of that 134,000 acres, we got them broken into 190 compartments. Each compartment's about 1,000 to 1,500 acres in size. And each compartment has anywhere from 30 to 60 timber stands in them. So these timber stands have an origin year, a cover type, a site index. A site index is a measure of like how productive the soil is on what it's growing on. So the origin year is big, you know. If we're looking to manage, you know, a timber stand to oak, you know, our oak tends to grow on our nicer sites. You know, we don't dictate the acreage of it. It's just, you know, what was growing there, what was cut in the past. Most of our oak stands originated from, you know, right around the Great Depression, the 20s, the 30s, before broad fire suppression. Those tend to grow on our higher ridges. So, you know, if we have an 80-acre stand of oak, that's not because that's where we decided, well, we're going to have 80 acres of oak here, 80 acres of oak there. That's just where it is. And, you know, it grows where the soil, you know, dictates where it goes. So we basically map out these stand areas, you know, based off of what's growing there and how it was cut in the past. So, you know, if we got an aspen stand that's mature and it's about 40 acres, you know, we're going to cut that 40 acres. If it's 60 acres, we'll cut 60 acres, if that makes some sense.
So you don't leave no standing. You just cut and regrowth that area.
So we have standards to leave 3% of the acreage that we are set to cut. So if we have 100 acres, a 100-acre aspen clear cut, we're required to leave 3 acres of that at least. It's 3 to 6%. We typically target those islands. If there's one little knob of oak, we got an acre or two of oak in 100 acres of aspen that we're looking to clear cut. We're going to look at leaving that 2 acres of oak, preferably in the middle of the stand to help break up the stand structure. And that provides, the microhabitat and, scattered mass production for deer and turkeys. And then we leave scattered individual trees out and about. And those are usually nice crowned white and red oaks. So those also help to, throw acorns around. So
every time I create a pretty good hunting spot.
Yeah. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and sometimes it's pockets of oak. If we got 3 in a clump, we'll leave 3. If we got one here and the next one isn't for another couple hundred yards, just because there's nothing but junky aspen in between them, there's going to be quite a swath where there's not an individual tree left. But that's the reason we leave certain individual trees, and they're usually really nice oaks.
Speaking of junky trees and junky aspens, from a deer hunter's perspective, on the regrowth, what do you see the best attractant towards deer coming in after you cut?
It's definitely aspen. They liked eating that aspen. Mm-hmm. I would say the magic age of aspen is anywhere from 1 to 6 or 7 years post harvest until the deer can't reach them. But yeah, deer love young aspen.
What's second, like maple?
Young aspen and red maple.
Yep.
I had a couple of quick follow-up questions on the stand. So you said origin year. Is the origin year just the last time that stand was cut?
The last time that stand was clear cut.
Okay.
So, yeah, if it was
restarted,
we don't count that as the origin year. So okay. if that stand was clear cut in 1948, that's the origin year.
So and this falls into my next question. Are these, I know in Michigan I was able to find them. Are those compartments and stand information in Wisconsin, are those available to the public?
I'm not sure if we have those available to the public. We have everything documented on the state's website. The Wisconsin DNR has all the county forests in the state mapped online. I think if you were to come into our office and ask for one, we'd probably provide it. But I don't think you can log on a computer and pull that stuff up.
Yeah. So
that was like my next question was on the same subject as what Jeremy's talking about. It'd be real interesting to know where those newer cuts of aspen are and stuff.
Yeah, we actually get guys coming into the office. Seems like every fall they want a map of all the 1 to 15-year-old aspen stands. They're usually grouse hunters. We get a lot of grouse guys up in the fall, but yeah, they're looking to specifically target those young aspen stands so you can go in there and grouse hunt them. So we do provide that information.
Uh-huh. And then the last question on the stands, how are you guys mapping those? Is that something you're doing on foot, or is there some computer software these days that's aiding the stand mapping, or is it just something that's known because stand mapping's been around for 100 years now?
It's a little bit of both. When we set a clear-cut boundary, we're usually painting in the boundaries with red paint lines. As we're doing that, we're GPSing them on our phones, and we can take those GPS lines, upload them to a computer, and then edit the stand lines by that. We usually get a recent aerial photo every 3 to 5 years where we can digitize clear-cut boundaries if they were off for whatever reason in the past. I think the broad initiation of when everything was mapped was done by aerial photo. But, the county forest program's been around long enough where most of these stands have been somewhat GPSed or somewhat, accurately mapped through a recent air photo where they're pretty accurate.
Yeah, a lot of historic data. Then we use a few different aerial photos, like a color infrared. It shows a lot where it's basically a farming aerial photo, but it basically shows where your green, healthy leaves are, at different shades, what it reflects. use that. We use a leaf on and a leaf off photo primarily.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess that's what I was getting at. Is there any tips from looking at that imagery that if I was a hunter looking for trying to identify an oak stand or an aspen stand or a maple stand, anything that you could highlight that would help me identify that as someone, looking for those specifically?
Yeah, if you get a hold of a color infrared photo, that makes big tooth aspen and red and white oak really pop. Red and white oak's kind of like a cherry red color. Maple shows up as like a light green to yellow. Aspen's kind of a greenish color, quaking aspen. Big tooth is kind of a pink. So you're looking for that dark red, but not too dark, because then the really, really dark stuff is usually conifers, so pine, spruce. It's kind of like a cherry red color on a color IR photo. That's how we can really identify how much oak we got in a timber stand. Is we look at that IR photo and we can see where the oak actually is, down to almost a tree level.
Do you guys use a site called Sentinel Hub by chance?
No.
Okay.
No.
Dan, you'll know Clem's Keith. Why can't I think of Keith's last name from the Beast right now?
Yeah.
I did a podcast with him on my channel, and he uses that site called Sentinel Hub because they have those IR maps. And Keith, he hunts northern Wisconsin in the big woods, and that's one of the ways he's found to hone in on those oak pockets. So kind of niche knowledge there. If you're not a forester, I don't know how Keith figured it out in the first place. And the really crazy thing is Keith, Stummer, that's his last name, I think. Yeah. Keith's actually colorblind. So it was crazy that even being colorblind, he was able to pick out the oaks on those infrared things. So.
He's the one that teaches you that. That's interesting.
Yeah. Right. So no, great tips there, guys. Appreciate that. Both of you.
So,
sorry. Go ahead, Dan.
I was just going to say, I've spent a good amount of time hunting in the area you guys are in Clark County, as you know. I bet both of you, because of your vast knowledge of that area, know where the bearbait buck was. I know you follow my stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So I've hunted in there quite a bit, and what I found is getting up in there, man, you can have a year where there's a couple good bucks around, and the next year there ain't nothing for a mile, and you got to go and search out and find a buck because there's not one on every block of woods up there. I would imagine your job getting in that woods really helps you get onto deer, because it can be pretty tough in that environment. There's a lot of wolves up there. There's and there's a lot of space up there and a lot of hunters. I mean, gun season seems like there's a lot of guys in there. So it takes a lot for a deer to get mature. I imagine you're spending a lot of time in the woods. What are you learning? I mean, you're probably getting way back further than a lot of people and being real comfortable with the woods too, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, we kind of have an advantage sometimes to use a UTV or a four-wheeler where a lot of guys can't go just because it's part of our job, which definitely helps to get back a lot way in there that most people don't even see. Mm-hmm. Well, just today, Sebastian and I were out seeing if a timber stand was ready to harvest, and we were probably 3/4 of a mile back in there, and there was no people sign, but there was loads of deer heavy runways and everything. But it makes sense because there's less people back there.
It's like you guys get to scout all year, get paid for it.
Basically,
pretty much.
Good deal there.
Yeah. Yeah, usually most of the areas we're picking, we do a lot of deer drives during gun season. Those areas I'm picking out because we were marking a timber sale or something right next door, and I noticed the deer sign, or we find a shed or something while we're out there marking. We're like, okay, that'd be a nice buck to keep tabs on, and we do a drive and some bedding cover nearby, and that's how we get on them. It seems like during gun season there.
So tell me a little bit about your drives. What are you targeting? Like now you find a sign and stuff, but is it mostly like pushing out clear cuts into open timber? Is it like stretches into lower land? Yeah.
I mean, usually we're looking at younger timber, so anything that's 5 to 15 years of age. Especially later in gun season. There's so many people out there, so many, activity, vehicles, people talking, people shooting rifles. A lot of them deer, they seem to coop up in them just absolute garbage holes where, nobody in their right mind would walk through.
Except for you.
We push some things out. Yeah, you wouldn't believe how many deer come out of some of them. A lot of people say we don't have a lot of deer. We did a drive 2 years ago. It was a really long drive. It was we were essentially driving out a big valley that had been clear cut 12 years ago. It had two really nice oak ridges on either side, and we were pushing it to a utility right away. And the guys I had posted on there almost lost count. I think he said he had seen about 26 different deer cross the power line. And that's just the deer that crossed, not the ones that shot back, not the ones that went off the side that nobody's seen, not the ones the driver's seen that, went back through the drive. So there was a pile of deer in some of them valleys in there. It just surprises me how many deer come squirting out of some of them places when you got a lot of eyes on it and you're pushing it out. So
you put a lot of bear up and occasional wolves too?
On drives, I don't think we've ever kicked out. Actually, we kicked out a tiny little bear last year. Must have been last year's.
I was one of the drivers, and it went right in front of me and the guy on the end, and it looked like a cub. It was tiny.
I
wanted to fill my bear tank.
A lot of bears up in there. I mean, we had a lot of bears hitting our baits and stuff, so they just must be more snaky about getting around you.
Yeah. And I think so. There's one more guy in our office. They kicked the bear out last year too, and I don't know. Most of them are already hiding in holes or whatever. But it surprises me how we don't see more. And the wolves, I don't know. They must just have an escape route. They hear you getting ready for a drive or something, and they sneak out before. But we've never kicked a wolf out on a drive. Not that I know.
No.
And we know they're there.
See a lot of wolves?
Yeah. We probably have 2 or 3 encounters every year with them while we're working, I would say.
That's interesting because, there can be a lot of wolves around, and they're just so smart that they really don't, let you see them most of the time. I've been on hunts where you see them coming through the woods, and you got the wind right and everything. And they just sense you and leave pretty quick. Sorry.
Yeah. How do you guys think that the wolves have impacted the deer hunting or deer movements or the forest in general?
It just seems like there's enough of them around where they're everywhere. I don't think it really moves the deer. I think the deer definitely tolerate them to a certain extent. In the winter, especially when we have deep snow, we come across a lot of wolf kills. They definitely seem to like their nub bucks. It seems to be 80 to 90% of the wolf kills I find are nub bucks.
They get a lot of the mature ones too. They get the old bucks and the young bucks, but not the in-between ones.
Yeah. That's like we'll find them in oak ridges usually, because that's usually where the deer are yarded up in the winter and they're eating acorns on good acorn crops. And I don't know if it's just one random fawn that doesn't know any better, hangs out close to the edge, and then they catch them. But that's typically where you find most of them. Otherwise, clear cuts when we don't have acorn crops and deer are eating woody browse. We'll stumble up across one. We walked across a couple leg bones today that looked like they were. It could have been a wolf kill. Legs were all shattered up and clean breaks, so that's what I'm anticipating.
There's a good chance. There's a lot of wolves in the area we were in, so.
Yep.
I had a lot of them hitting my bear baits when I had bear bait up there. It was interesting because you'd have, a bear on the bait, and you'd have deer in the background. You can see them waiting for the bear to leave.
Yeah.
Because they couldn't eat the bait unless the bear opened it up. You know what I mean? Because it's an enclosed bait.
Mm-hmm.
So when the bear would come in, the deer would actually come in and wait for the bear to open it up. And then they would come in as soon as the bear leaves. But what was interesting is then wolves would come in too. And when the wolves come in, you wouldn't see any deer in the background. But 20, 30 minutes after they leave, deer would be on the camera, even with the wolf scent there and everything else. Mm-hmm. It was like they put up with them to a degree.
Yeah. When I get wolves on camera, sometimes it's in the same day, or even just an hour later, I'm getting a deer, walking by. I think they tolerate them. I don't think they necessarily vacate the area or whatever when wolves are around. But
do you have any hard encounters with wolves? Or stand their ground or anything?
Yeah. it seems like whenever we encounter them, they're not afraid. Last summer, I was marking a timber stand. I think it was by myself. It was
You were by
cloudy.
yourself.
Yeah, it was a cloudy, windy day, and I heard a stick snap, and I looked up, and there was one actually staring at me at like 20, 30 yards. Just kind of stood its ground, just kind of walked away off to the side, and just kept looking back at me. So yeah, I mean that they don't seem to necessarily run away. Me and Jake seen a pack. I think it was mid-July on an active logging job. It was about midday, lunchtime. We were driving in. The processor was cutting trees down, and we seen what we thought was a coyote cross. Ended up being a small wolf. We were like, "Well, I wonder what that was." And then next thing you know, a really big one crossed. I was like, "Oh, it's a wolf." And we're watching them too, and they're just kind of standing on the right side of the logging road, looking back at us. And then a third one crossed. So we must have got caught right in the middle of the pack. And I was surprised to see them that close to the logging equipment.
Yeah, it is interesting.
Yeah. And
I've had them follow me out in the dark when I'm bear hunting, not in Clark County, but in Minnesota. And I had one where I walked around the corner on a logging road once, and I was actually with my wife. We were way up in the north woods in Minnesota, near Canada. And we come around the corner, and there's a wolf laying in the logging road. And it is staring at us at 40 yards. And I really got an uneasy feeling. And it's like, that wolf should be running. If they're not running, that's not a good feeling because they should fear you.
Yeah, it's uneasy when they hold their ground. I asked the federal biologist, because he likes us to keep tabs on when we see him and whatnot. And I was like, "Is that normal for them to do that?" He's like, "Yeah, they don't really run away. They kind of just hold their ground."
Interesting. Because they're a big animal. If they want them to take you out, they take you out pretty quick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know. But yeah, there's definitely quite a bit of them around. Didn't take them long to fill the quota when they had the wolf season down here.
Yeah,
No.
it's amazing because that's only you guys are only like 2.5 hours from me, in southeastern Wisconsin, and it's amazing how close we actually are. I mean, and there's so many wolves over there. It wouldn't be too hard if they got across 94 and started really developing a pack. I mean, they could start spreading over here pretty quick, especially if there's no season.
I seen a post. There was a confirmed sighting in southwestern Iowa just last week.
Yep. I heard about that too.
Yeah.
We had one here that was hit by a car, and I know of one that was shot during a coyote hunt, like 10 or 15 years ago, maybe a little longer than that. But so occasionally they get over here, but you'd think that that's more the road ones, the ones out wandering looking for a new place, but
it's usually young males. Same kind of the cougar deal.
You wonder if that's going to have a big effect on Clark County, because Clark County still has a real high number of deer in comparison to northern Wisconsin, but it also has a very high population of wolves.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Well, Dan, you want to do some questions, or do you have any other questions specific for the forestries?
Try to look for questions that include those guys.
Sure. Yeah, we've got one right off the bat, and Sebastian touched on it briefly.
Before we end this, though, I'd like to hear at least one story out of each of those about a deer hunt up there. But go ahead with the questions.
Okay, sure. It says, do you all use fire much for management of invasives or to promote turkey population? So maybe talk about prescribed fire, like what's the best use case and what are the ideal outcomes or end states?
Yeah, so we're actually pretty fortunate. We got a pretty good invasive program. We don't have a lot of invasive species on the public grounds in Clark County. When we do find them, me and Jake are actually pretty active about spraying them, getting them controlled. We're not at the point where our timber stands are widespread full of buckthorn or garlic mustard. Every summer we spend about a whole month of June and probably half the month of July trying to contain and control the invasives that we do find on the county forest. So we don't have to use fire to control it. We do use herbicides quite a bit to control it. Our main use of fire is to regenerate oak. We're usually using it to burn off the leaf litter and hope we get an acorn crop the following fall. So those acorns are dropping in bare soil. As far as turkey habitat goes, we do what we call timber stand improvement cuts. And what that entails is we manage young oaks, usually around between ages 10 and 15, about 1 to 2 inches in diameter, 15 feet tall. We actually do a pre-commercial thinning on those. And in the past, turkey stamp dollars funded some of that. And that was to, promote young oak growth. By age 35, 40, those oaks are going to start dropping acorns themselves, and they're going to be young and healthy growing. And that, in turn, turns into mass trees, turns into food source, turns into roost trees. And usually those individual wildlife trees that we're looking to leave are big, wolfy, gnarly white oaks, with horizontal branches and stuff. I'm a big turkey guy, so if I can help promote turkey hunting habitat, I will. So.
Cool.
Well, before we get into some more questions, we'll start with Jake. Give us a good story about hunting Clark County and or the big woods.
Gotta think here. I think my favorite thing to do is probably drives during gun season on our forest. Just get a bunch of guys together, go push out some younger clear cuts. It's just I'm always amazed by how much deer we kick out. And I'll tell an embarrassing story. We do this one drive, the one drive Sebastian was talking about between the two oak knobs in the valley, and I set up last year on this one spot and the year before, and I've missed a buck twice on it. But it just shows it just all came together, but it's just user error of the gun, I think. More practice.
I think everybody on the call has been guilty of user error once or twice.
Hopefully next year will be third time's the charm, as they say. But yeah, I think I don't really like sitting during gun season just because the deer are so pushed around and they all seem like they know where their hiding spots are. So, yeah, I prefer to do drives, I guess, down here at least on public, or up here at least on public.
And how about you, Sebastian?
Yeah. So yeah, Jake's actually a pretty good gadget guy for me. So usually I'm orchestrating the drives that we do. And, we're mostly younger guys, few older guys that usually post and whatnot. But it's hard for me to describe somebody. Some of the drives we're doing are a mile and a quarter in length. They take forever. So I'm usually the one that's got to be on the far end of the drive and make sure people don't get lost or people aren't running way out ahead. So I'm usually the one kind of orchestrating the pushers. And it's hard for me to describe somebody where to go. Like, you got to go up this trail, take a left, walk in there 200 yards. There's a flat. And I can just tell Jake, and that sale we marked, 2 years ago, and I stepped on that freaking beehive and I got stung 3 times. And yeah, I know where that is. I'm like, yeah, go post there. But no, as far as stories go, a couple years ago we missed. As a group, we missed some real dandies. I had found a really nice shed off a really nice mainframe 10. I kind of had an idea where he was. We pushed out a pretty good bedding area, and I had my uncle posted up on the far end of the drive, and he actually missed him. But yeah, that was a really nice buck. Last year we did a push in some really young aspen, really thorny stuff. I had some health issues, so I had to post most of the drives last year. But Jake's dad was one of the pushers, and we ended up kicking up a pretty nice 9-point, nice mature buck. He went back on the drive. We were pushing with the wind. He went back on the drive, and his dad had hit him. Wasn't a really good hit. A couple guys were tracking him right away. I wish they hadn't, but they kind of had pushed him probably farther than he would have went. So after dark, we ended up getting back on the blood trail. We kicked him up a few times about 6 o'clock, and we could hear him. moving around, so he wasn't getting very far. So we ended up backing out. I did not want to leave him overnight. We were in wolf country, but we came back a couple hours later and we found him. Pretty nice buck.
I was gonna say you must be having some success. I can see the bottoms of 3 shoulder mounts behind you there.
Yeah. Well, actually, two of these are muleys from Wyoming, and
oh, nice.
The kills are from private land. So
that's good. Yeah. Well, let's see. We got another question here, and I don't know if this. It sounds like it's from Pennsylvania, so I don't know if you guys are dealing with this, but viewer Schultze Will says, "How much of a concern is the spotted lanternfly? Seems like a big concern in Pennsylvania. So, is that something you guys are dealing with?"
we haven't really discussed it.
No.
The next big thing everybody's worried about is Asian longhorn beetle. If we get that, that's going to wipe out all our maples. So I'm hoping we don't get that either.
Jeez.
So that's kind of the next big scare.
Where
it's in the States now?
Yeah, I was going to say.
I haven't heard of it.
I think it's starting to pop up in the eastern U.S., but I don't think it's anywhere near Wisconsin.
And when we lost our ash trees here in southeastern Wisconsin, man, it changed deer hunting dramatically. And now we've got such, I know you guys ain't got it yet, but our whole area here at the public lands are just getting taken over by buckthorn. There's vast areas of it. And, it makes great deer cover, but you look at that and you're thinking, man, what is it doing to the forest? Because it's growing in the understory of the oaks and stuff, and there's no way those oaks will regenerate. You know what I'm saying? And we don't do near the amount of logging you guys do. And I think a lot of it is political here because people like your tree huggers around here and stuff just don't understand logging. And every time they make a cut someplace, they freak out. You're cutting down the forest. You're killing all the stuff for the animals, where they don't realize you're actually making it better, And because of that, we do a lot more select cuts, I think, here. That's why I was kind of asking how you did your cuts. I noticed a lot of it here. They don't they leave a lot standing, just probably to appease the complaints. But
that's social too. But the private lands around here too, landowners are still pretty gun shy on doing, we call it even age management. We thin a stand throughout its lifetime, and then we end it with a clear cut, and we start the stand over. Uneven age management is the idea of you want your timber stand to have all ages of trees. You're harvesting a cohort of every age of that stand every time you go in there every 15 to 20 years. And the idea of that is you don't have to clear cut at all. You just keep thinning that into perpetuality. So it's common down south. And then in hill country, it's you're either going to be clear cutting it or you're going to be thinning it real hard because it's hard to get around and move logging equipment on that stuff. The buckthorn is bad up here down in like the Black River Falls area. You drive up 94 between Millston and Black River Falls, and it's everywhere in the highway right away. So it's not far from us. And we do have, we have buckthorn, a couple patches we just don't know if we're ever going to catch, but it's not widespread on our forest yet, thankfully, but it's coming.
It's coming, yeah.
Well, this question will be for all three of you. What are your top 3 go-to big wood strategies for bucks? So let's go start off with Sebastian. If you had to pick 3 things to up your odds, or maybe even talk about like habitat type, doesn't have to be like a hunting strategy specifically. What are you doing to up your odds? Give me 3 tips.
Yeah, accessibility is one thing. If you're way back out off the road and or pretty much pressure, you can be close to the road, but is the area pressured or not? If there's a ton of people hunting in there, chances are he's not going to stick around that area. Then you want bedding and food. On an acorn crop, you're going to want some sort of mass production nearby, oak acorn somewhere. And then if you could sprinkle in some young aspen in there, they eat aspen pretty regularly. When we clear cut oaks, everybody thinks we're taking away all the food. We are for a while. Those oaks aren't going to be dropping acorns until they're 35, 40 years old. But the years we don't have acorns, they're relying specifically on woody browse, young clear cuts. The young clear cuts is what get our deer through the winters when we don't have acorn crops. This year we had a great one. The year before we had another good one, but the year before that, I don't think we had much. So the deer are relying specifically on young woody browse. Active logging jobs in the middle of winter, they're usually stacked full of deer. They'll follow the logging equipment around and they'll eat the tops of the trees. As soon as the logging equipment's off the job, they're in there eating them like crazy. If you walk it, a day or two later, you'll see that every single bud on the tip of them branches is gone and chewed off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just like a dinner bell to them. Once they hear that machine stop for the day, they're just flocking right to it.
Yeah, woody browse, hard mast, and bedding cover, and preferably less pressure. If you can find an area with low pressure, that helps.
And real quick before we move on to Jake, this would be a question for either one of you. What are some of the factors that go into like a predictable mass crop? So is there something that happens in the spring or the fall of the previous year that you could say, oh yeah, we're definitely going to have a bumper crop, or we're going to have a, no crop or hardly any crop? What factors impact acorn production?
It's hard to say. If we get a frost in May, that's going to impact it negatively for the next year or two. If we get partial leaf out and then we get a frost and it kills the flowering buds of the next year's acorn crop, that's going to hurt it. Usually mid-July, you can start seeing acorns developing on the end of the branches, so you can kind of get an idea of whether or not you're going to have an acorn crop year that year or not. The white oaks take a little longer. They always start small and then they start juicing up, mid to late August. You got white oaks versus red oaks. You're definitely going to want to look at white oaks as their preferred food choice. So if you got a little bit of both, look for the white oaks.
And then Jake, how about you? What are your favorite tips for big woods?
Yeah, food sources is big. I'd say bedding, like swamp edges and stuff. I know Dan teaches a lot, like find those little areas where the buck can hide in, but yet he's kind of out of the way of everybody else. Sometimes, you got to go across the swamp to find this one little island out in the middle, just for him to get away from people and predators, I guess. So bedding and I'd say adjacency to food sources. And then, the biggest one I think I've seen is pressure, like hunting pressure at least. So, it's definitely like what I was saying today. I mean, you could see the deer were much more active and heavier in that one area where there was hardly any people sign.
It sounds like Beast 101. We got another question here from Pharrell. Any replanting of high value timber species? So do you guys just try to regenerate naturally, or are you doing any actual planting?
Jake can touch into the planting. We plant a lot of red pine, so that's a high value tree.
Yeah. As far as oak goes, we try to get natural as much as we can. Unfortunately, we're pretty successful in getting oak to come back, but we plant a lot of red pine and jack pine. I'd probably say we probably plant 90% red pine, 10% jack pine. We don't, in parts of our forest, like we don't like white pine, the sandier soils, we get a lot of easy natural regeneration, but a lot of times we want to replant. If we want, red pine's a high value species, so we want to keep planting and taking advantage of it too.
And we got another question from Steve Denoyer. He's wondering if is all the big timber on a rotation cut basis to renew all 138,000 acres or whatever it is, or do they just cut based on need in an area?
It's not so much on need. It's, everything's on a schedule. And, that rotation age can be extended or shortened based on how healthy the trees are. If they're growing on a nicer site, richer soil, they got richer quality species like basswood and sugar maple growing with them. We're looking at, cutting those later. We're looking at pushing those out because the soil's richer and they can grow at a higher rate for a longer period of time. we have areas that we don't do any management on, high use areas. We have a few mounds in Clark County. Otherwise, it's pretty darn flat. A lot of those mounds we leave because those are usually touristy areas. Dan camps at Wildcat Mound. We don't do anything on Wildcat Mound. Those types of areas.
Okay.
People like to climb up and look out over the landscape and whatnot. Creek bottoms. We'll cut within a certain amount of footage to the creek, but we're not going to cut right up to the creek or the river. We're never going to clear cut right along the river. We have to leave a certain amount of trees within a certain number of footage from the riverbanks that go through the county forest.
Is that for erosion control or something?
Yep, water quality.
Yeah.
Water quality, erosion, that kind of ties together.
So everything's on a schedule. So when that stuff pops up, we have a big reporting system that our supervisor goes through. He looks at what's a higher priority than something else. If we got aspen, and if you've noticed aspen, when it gets a larger in diameter, it starts growing those mushrooms off the sides of the tree. That's a high risk. That's a high risk stand. We're looking at harvesting that stand sooner than later because it's already starting to decay. When we're looking at our oak stands, you look at the bottom 2 feet of the log. If we start getting those big cracks and big seams on the bottom of those logs, they're starting to decay from the inside out. Those are priority stands that we want to try to get oak seedlings in the seed soil or in the seed bank, so we can successfully regenerate that stand to younger oaks and get that the next generation of oak growing on that site, because the older ones are starting to deteriorate, and the older those oaks get, the less acorns they actually drop. So we're going to lose our seed source in the next 30 to 40 years on that older cohort of oaks. So it's kind of a race against time, but everything's regulated. We're looking at cutting about 3,000 acres of the county forest every year. And that's about 50-50 clear cut and thin. So we're looking at thinning about 1,500 acres and clear cutting 1,500 acres. And we try to spread that out across the county. In the past, the loggers and the county forest system had hit areas harder than others. So sometimes, history has to repeat itself because everything's due again. So sometimes we're hitting areas harder than we'd like to, but we try to spread it out for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a lot. Yeah, it sounds like a lot, but at the size of the forest, that's what, 2 or 3% of the forest a year, right? So that's 50 years to get through it all.
Yeah, and we established 3,000 acres, but every timber sale has a 2 or 3 year contract on it. So we have, every year we set 3,000 acres. Well, there might be, 9,000, 10,000 acres on the books. We get a really good winter. All of a sudden in 1 year, we end up physically cutting like 5,000 acres. It changes. If we get a bad year like this winter, when things don't freeze fully and we don't get a lot of logging going on, then that number is lower than it normally is.
Jake, question for you. Aiden Outdoors viewer asked, what's the best way for removing buckthorn?
I feel like the best way is probably how we do it at the county is do a basil spray on it. You basically spray around the bowl of the tree at least 18 inches. And it basically sucks the herbicide in, and then it basically kills it from inside to out. And then you can go in and cut them down if you want, or just let them stand. They'll eventually tip over, break off, whatever else. We do mainly basil treatments, but you can do a foliar treatment too, where you're just spraying the leaves with the herbicide too. It's crazy how fast it can work when you do a basil treatment. It seems like within an hour you could start to see wilting and whatnot.
Well, what's the preferred herbicide there? Scenario.
The what?
Well, what's the preferred herbicide?
We use Garlon and Diesel.
Okay.
Diesel acts as like the clinging agent, and then the Garlon is the active ingredient.
Okay.
Garlon 4 Ultra that's the one version we use. 20% mixture with Diesel. So 2 parts Garlon or 1 part Garlon to 4 parts Diesel. for the basal spray application. Foliar is just 2%.
Yeah.
So it all depends on how big your buckthorn is. If you got buckthorn that's 2 or 3 inches in diameter and it's like 20 feet tall, you're definitely going to want to basal spray that because you're not going to want to spray way over your head. If you got a lot of young buckthorn, that are only about a foot in height, you're looking at probably foliar spraying those. If you've got a woodlot and it's just chock full of buckthorn, the best thing you could probably do is rent a fecon head, run it through there, mulch all that stuff up, and then when it resprouts and it's only about a foot tall, go in with a backpack sprayer and foliar spray it, and you'll torch them right out.
Is it fecon head? Is that like the forestry mower, like the Bobcat head?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. That'd probably be your easiest plan of attack if you've got a private woodlot, and it's just chock full of buckthorn and it's all 15 feet tall.
Yeah, I worked with a conservancy that they're really tree huggerish, and they don't, they would let you hunt for doing work, however many hours you get names in a drawing, right? And they didn't want to hurt anything but the buckthorn, so they wouldn't let you spray anything. You had to cut everything, and you'd literally, there's 20, 30 guys trying to get in there to hunt that are going every week and 4 or 5 hours a week cutting, and you'd cut an area, and then 4 years later you'd be cutting that same area and it would already be just a tangle. And it was like you'd never catch up to that stuff. You just couldn't. As a matter of fact, it was constantly getting worse, even with that number of people in that 400 or 500 acres or whatever it was rotating through there. They never caught up, and it got worse and worse and worse.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Buckthorn throws a lot of seed too.
Yeah, it does.
Plus, the animals don't help either, so that's another negative.
Let's do one or two more here. Kevin Holstein asked, what are good types of woody browse? So we talked about aspen, so let's maybe skip aspen and talk about other plants that you see in your travels that deer are utilizing in a a mostly forested environment.
Yeah, woody browse. Their preferred woody browse is probably red maple. We just don't have as much of it as aspen. We still have a fair amount, and red maple likes to stump sprout versus root sprout like aspen does. So when you cut aspen, it sprouts from the roots of the original trees. So it grows a lot of single shoots. When you clear cut, or when you cut a red maple, from one stem of that tree, you're going to get like 30 more stems that try to grow out from it. And that thing's just a smorgasbord for deer. They'll go through and they'll just eat that thing like a weed whacker. You walk through in like June or July, and if that red maple is chest height or shorter, they're going to have every single bud on that red maple whacked off. The next one would probably be oak. They do a lot of damage to oak too. When we're out there looking at, we count oak seedlings in the summer. There's a system we use to determine whether or not an oak stand is fully stocked with oak, and that's how we determine whether or not we can actually clear cut that stand or not. So we want to make sure we have enough oak seedlings in the stand that are going to replace those oaks. If we don't have enough, then we're not going to clear cut it yet. We're going to wait. But we always pay attention to browse when we do that. And white and the red oaks, they usually get a pretty good nicking by the deer too.
There ain't too much they don't eat.
No, pine. If they're eating pine, something's not right.
Right? Yeah.
And buckthorn. If they're eating buckthorn, something's not right either. And
actually, they love buckthorn. The leaves.
Yeah.
They don't
the
plant.
Yeah.
They don't the bud.
If they're eating
but those leaves, they eat them like crazy.
Yeah. So I was actually shed hunting. So I live in Osseo. So Trempealeau County is just a buckthorn central. I was shed hunting on some state pieces around here, and I noticed like blue deer piss, and it just perplexed me. So I Googled it, and when they browse common buckthorn, not glossy buckthorn, common buckthorn, when they browse that, it turns their piss blue.
Really?
That was the strangest thing.
You know what?
It's weird.
There's the fun fact of the show right there.
Because I've seen that blue piss, and it always boggled me.
Yeah.
And it makes sense because where there's a ton of buckthorn. Wow.
Yep.
That's
Common buckthorn. If they're browsing the buds on common buckthorn, it turns their piss blue. It's super
Okay.
strange. It doesn't hurt the deer. It just turns it blue for whatever reason.
I always wondered. I was like, how can it be blue?
Yeah, it's like Gatorade blue.
Yeah, I've seen it. I've seen it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dan, here's a question for you. This quick one. Do a backflip ask. Are we ever going to bring guests on live again, like viewers or subscribers?
We can. The reason we haven't been bringing a lot of them on is because a lot of them have bad connections, and it kind of takes away from the quality of the show. But what we'd like to have is a moderator that can kind of get the right people and stuff, and do it behind the scenes. So we're working towards that direction.
Yeah, and we've had a lot of guests on too, and we don't like to have complicate the works when we have guests on. We're trying to be respectful of the guest time and their expertise and talk to them. So haven't had any on lately, but we're not against it.
We do try and get better guests or better call-ins on though, just because it sucks when somebody's breaking off and on and off and on.
Yeah, that's something I got to work on.
I really like working with the audience more though. Yeah.
And this question, I'm not sure. Maybe you guys will know. Where'd that one go? There was a question about SMZs. Does SMZ mean anything to you guys?
SMZs.
Yeah.
I'm guessing he's talking about stream management zones. We call them riparian management zones.
Okay.
Yeah,
I found the question. How important are SMZs? So yeah, maybe stream management zones. I'm not sure what the acronym means for buck activity in the big woods. So it probably stream or riparian areas.
Yeah, riparian management zones. They tend to be a hot spot, and going back to Dan's question, what we're looking to drive. That's usually where the big bucks are going to come sneaking through. Are them the drainages and creek bottoms into the wind. If you can get a poster on it with a slight off wind, looking over one of those off to the side. Or whatnot. They're usually sneaking through there. I put a lot of cameras on a lot of them creek bottoms, and during the rut, they definitely seem to like to channel those. You get a lot of random daytime buck pictures of bucks you've never seen before, and they're coming through on them stream bottoms. Especially like if you leave one in the middle of a clear cut, if we got a stream and we got to leave a buffer on either side of it, and it's going right through the middle of that.
Oh, that'd be a magnet.
Oh yeah, it's great. And for sure,
funnel point, yeah.
Yeah, that's right where they'll travel.
All right, I think that answers most of the questions we had in the chat. So I want to thank Sebastian and Jake both for coming on and sharing your expertise of forestry with us, and definitely some takeaways for me. So Dan, any last words on your end?
No, it was really good having you guys on. I always like learning from experts in the woods. I mean, you guys are out there daily. I appreciate you guys coming out.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, no problem. It was fun.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for watching. That's going to do it for us today. We will be back next week, Tuesday, 7 p.m. Central. And don't forget Beast Gear and Stealth Outdoors will be at the Wisconsin Dells Expo this weekend. So if you're in the neighborhood, stop on by and say hi to those guys. Thanks everyone. Catch you next time.
We'll see ya.